to a bank, I call my son Caleb. When I need counseling and when I need therapy, no, I don't go to a psychologist. I go to my son Micah. Because all of my children have grown up. And they're no longer children. They're adults. And I had to learn to treat them like adults. And so when they graduated from college, I took each of them out to dinner. And I gave them a kiss. And I said, you are now an adult. We will not turn our backs on one another. But we will commit to love one another. They built a relationship. And the last time in 1992 in U.S. history, we balanced the budget with the two of them. God does great things when we come together. That God is calling us. Not only that we build relationships in the diaspora, but we build relationships with one another. So some of you might say, well, Rick, how does that fit me personally? What about the parent who hasn't seen their child in a long time? What if you said, hey, how do I rebuild a relationship? Or what about if you've gone through a divorce and you've not spoken to your ex? What about saying, how do I build a bridge? What about the neighbor that you don't really like? How do you begin to build relationships? What about your Gen G? How do you build the bridge? You know, I have children. I have 5 children, 4 boys and 1 girl. What's fortunate is my 1 girl can beat up all of her brothers. But I have 5 children. And I remember last year coming to the prayer breakfast. And when my brother Earl and I got back home, we saw the Gen Z's frustration. And Earl asked, Rick, what do you think the problem is? What Gen Z is dying, and I'm talking because I have Gen Zs. They're dying to be loved. They're dying for a seat at the table. They're dying to be respected. And I won't ever forget when my boys were growing up, because sometimes as parents, we want our children to stay children all of their lives. But that's not the case with Gen Zers. Gen Zers have grown up. They've gone to college. Some of our Gen Zers are smarter than we are. I have a daughter. She's a doctor. Whenever I need advice on my health, I don't go to a hospital. I call my daughter. Whenever I want to invest my money, I don't go in and go to a bank. I call my son Caleb. When I need counseling and when I need therapy, no, I don't go to a psychologist. I go to my son Micah. Because all of my children have grown up. And they're no longer children. They're adults. And I had to learn to treat them like adults. And so when they graduated from college, I took each of them out to dinner. And I gave them a kiss. And I said, you are now an adult. I expect you to make decisions like an adult. I don't have to go and live anywhere in your neighborhood. None of my kids live within 1,000 miles of where I live. But they all act like adults. And one of the most frustrating things that could happen to a Gen Zer is that you keep treating them like a child. And I got to tell you, I started praying for Kenya. Because, I work with young people. I mentor young people. I understand a little bit about their minds. And one of the things I prayed for is I said, here's my prayer. I said, Lord, I pray the adults would apologize to our Gen Zers. I pray, see, it's like African Americans. We live in America, but a lot of times we don't feel respected. And people ask, why is there always a race issue in America? I can tell you why. Because no one's ever apologized. No one's ever said, I'm sorry for the horrific pain that you experienced. They've never done it in our history in this country. And I just want to suggest to you, when we're talking about relationships and we're talking about really rebuilding relationships, wouldn't it be beautiful if leaders would stand up and say to our Gen Zs, we had you arrested, and we know that had to be traumatizing, and we're sorry. We shut down the internet, and we know that that's your primary source of communication, and we're sorry. Now we want to bring you to the table so that you can have a voice, because you're no longer a child. You're an adult. And we want to begin to say, how do we begin to treat you like an adult? I won't ever forget the time, and I'm almost done. I won't ever forget the time when a guy gave me permission to be an adult. I was in the NFL, my first year in the NFL. We had a coach he was a German guy by the name of Marty Schottenheimer. And when I got to Cleveland, I would go in, and when I would see the head coach, Marty Schottenheimer, I would say, hey, how are you doing, Coach Schottenheimer? And he looked back at me and he said, I'm doing fine. How are you doing, Player Bolden? And the next day I would see him and I said, well, Coach Schottenheimer. And he would say, okay, Player Bolden. And after about a week, I went to him and I said, why do you keep calling me Player Bolden? He said, Ricky, you're an adult now. You don't have to call me Mr. Schottenheimer. You don't have to call me Coach Schottenheimer. You can refer to me as Marty. That's my name. You are a man now. I expect you to act like a man. And that's what our Gen Zers are crying for. They're crying for the right to be adults, because they are. They've gone to college. They're buying their own house. They're getting married. They're adults. And I want to encourage you even here today, Kenya. I challenge you that when we start talking about rebuilding relationships, then the question is, how do we begin to rebuild the relationships with our Gen Zers? Because they love you, they care for you, they respect you, but they don't feel respected. The last thing, and I'm leaving now, but you know, there was one other thing as I'm leaving, and I don't want to get out of here. The last relationship that I think you need to build, not only with Africans in the diaspora, not only Africans within your own country, but as I was leaving, I said, you must also build relationships, really rebuild your relationship with the Lord. That is serious. Did you hear what this wonderful man, Nehemiah, said? Listen to what he said here. And I'm on my way out of here. You know, my time is up. Yep, my time is up. Let me tell you what he said here. This was so